Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Chesapeake Foodshed Network's, or CFN's, Network Learning Series webinar. My name is Yona Sipos, and I'm the Program Director for the Chesapeake Foodshed Network, which is coordinated by Local Concepts, a consulting firm providing the development and backbone support for the CFN. I am joined today by another of the Local Concepts team members, Hannah Gross, who is the Outreach Coordinator for the network. Before we jump into the Network Learning webinar, I'll provide a very brief overview of the CFN. The Chesapeake Foodshed Network is a group of organizations, businesses, funders, agencies, and other change agents working across the Chesapeake watershed to build a stronger and more resilient food system. We are a relatively new initiative, about 1.5 years in the making. The leadership group that spurred the network's development did so because they recognized that a great deal of extraordinary work was being done to advance our regional food system, but there was no entity intentionally trying to build connections, trust, and relationships among those out there doing the work. The mission of the CFN, therefore, is to catalyze connections and collaborations that help build a sustainable, resilient, inclusive, and equitable regional food system in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. We believe that by catalyzing connections and collaborations, we are stronger together, such that we can help to accelerate change in the food system. We encourage conversation and connection in various ways, including via social media. Please note the usernames and hashtags on the slide footers. We would love to see your tweets. So this is a picture of our network building blocks. The foundation of our network is all about building connections, getting to know one another, sharing information and knowledge, building relationships and trust, with the thought that as we know one another better, we might, over time, see opportunities to align and to work collectively toward action. We invite anyone and everyone who supports our vision of a sustainable, resilient, inclusive, and equitable regional food system to participate in the Chesapeake Foodshed Network. The Network Learning Series includes education, support for strengthening the network, and opportunities to grow organizational capacity. This is a new series, and it's one that's in development, and it's intended to include webinars such as this one, in-person meetings, regional tours, and workshops that create space to share lessons learned, hear from experts, and strengthen collective capacity and opportunity. Today's Network Learning Series webinar is an opportunity for all of us to learn more about how nonprofits can be more enterprising and successful. We are delighted that at last count, 60 people from across the U.S. had registered for the webinar. The presenters today will be Donald Summers and Chris Longston of Altruist Partners. I'll introduce them further in just a moment, but first I will note a few housekeeping items. If you have any questions or comments during the webinar, we invite you to type them into the questions box in your GoToWebinar control panel. Hannah will be collecting your questions and will share them with our presenters following their presentation. Within a few days of the webinar, we'll share a recording of the presentation, any additional Q&A, and a post-webinar survey, which we would be very grateful if you would fill in with your feedback and insights. So without further ado, it is with great pleasure that I introduce our presenters today who will be speaking on the topic of enterprising nonprofits, how to accelerate revenue and impact. Donald Summers founded Altruist Partners in 2006. He is a social entrepreneur, speaker, author, and management consultant with a long track record of helping organizations achieve dramatic increases in organizational effectiveness and growth. He is a graduate of Middlebury and Harvard. He is joined today by Chris Longston, a partner at Altruist Partners, who was an executive at Packard with over 25 years of experience in strategic planning, operations management, and building high-performing teams. Chris holds an MBA from Seattle University. And so with that, I will turn this over to Donald and ask for him to take it away. Welcome to you both, and thank you for sharing your expertise and time with us today. And just a quick reminder that there will be the Q&A opportunity at the end of the presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yona. Chris and I are delighted to be here. Chris, would you like to say hello?
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here.
First, whenever we give talks like this, the most important thing is to thank everyone for the work that you're doing. We are honored to be part of a movement where the most thoughtful, dedicated people are working hard to create a better world. The work isn't easy. It's challenging. You're trying to reshape society for the better, for a more just, equitable, sustainable world, and we're just honored to help. And we're here to deliver a message that we believe is, we're going to borrow a word from Yona, highly catalytic. We at Altruist have been working with hundreds of nonprofits around the world, and we want to present an overall package of ideas that we believe is very powerful. And we want to challenge some conventional thinking. We want to give you new ways to consider your work. And then we want to transition from those more theoretical frameworks and big ideas into practical tools and concepts that you can use. And then we're going to conclude the webinar with some specific examples and really get all the way right down to the nuts and bolts of accelerating your work. That will lead to a Q&A where Chris and I will answer questions, and our friend and colleague Hannah at the Chesapeake Food Network will be moderating. With that said, we'll begin. Thank you again for all the work that you're doing. First, we're going to start with note the script in the bottom of the screen. We at Altruist believe that nonprofits are best and most powerful when they think of themselves as social enterprises. And we're going to describe what that looks like. First of all, if any of you are familiar with Dan Pallotta, he has a very good book called Uncharitable. And he explores the history of the nonprofit movement and really some of the core challenges. And you might really sympathize with the little guy in this picture, where the average size of a nonprofit in the United States is $500,000. But we're up against very, very large problems and large challenges. But what Dan Pallotta says is we have beliefs that keep us small and keep us from solving problems. And figuring out what those beliefs are, recognizing them, and then moving past those beliefs into tools and practices that that foster effectiveness, well, that's what we're all about, and that's what this presentation is about today. First of all, we want to go into a broad look at what the social sector looks like. And this is really phenomenal. Even people who've been working in the nonprofit sector for decades are surprised to learn that, you know, there's a lot of money in the nonprofit sector, $1.5 trillion annually. It's the 5th biggest sector in the United States economy. It's almost 10% of our total economy. Yet fewer than 200 nonprofits have grown past $50 million in the past half century. But 75,000 other organizations have. Let's take a look at what that really means. It's a surprising statistic. This right here is perfect equality. If we look at revenue is our y-axis and population is the x-axis, 50% of the population has 50% of the revenue. And we're going to look at, surprisingly, this is U.S. households. We've all heard that households are great and are greatly unequal. Here's 90% of U.S. households only have 27% of the wealth. But look at nonprofits over here. It's surprising to learn that really only 4% of the nonprofits have over 85% of the wealth. That's primarily hospitals and universities. These are large, what we call enterprise class nonprofits. They're multi-billion-dollar organizations. But the rest of the sector is stuck. They're very, very small nonprofits. The nonprofit sector is even more unequal than U.S. household wealth, which is as incredibly as unequal as it gets. So let's first think about that. Nonprofits, there's over 1 million of them down here that are small and they're not growing. This is a challenge that we know how to solve. And let's think about why we're in that stuck framework. Why are there 1 million small nonprofits that are small. And I'm going to bet that most every participant on this call is from a nonprofit that's below $1 or $2 million a year in revenue. And I'm going to guess that every nonprofit could use a lot more revenue than that to solve the size of the problems that you're addressing. Let's look at that. We have for-profits over here. The for-profit sector, these are highly engineered, very scalable. They make tons of money. And the nonprofit sector over here, you have all the good programs. We're fostering social justice and equity, the incredibly trustworthy organizations. But the for-profits aren't sustainable. And as we've seen, the nonprofits, most of them are too small and can't scale. Jed Emerson is a wonderful thinker. He calls this the schizophrenia of capitalism. We're chewing up the planet with our for-profits, and our nonprofits are putting little band-aids on the injuries. It's not working. The good news is there's a better way to think about the world. And all of this is very important to how you conceive of your own business, and indeed how you plan your own business, how you plan your own organization, and plan your own fundraising. Think about yourself not as a nonprofit, but as a social enterprise. You have all the good stuff of the private sector, all the good stuff of the public sector, you put it together. You're very metrics driven, you're very measured, you have very ambitious plans, ready to get to scale, and you really understand the best ways to raise money. If you marry that with your programs for doing good work, the power of a nonprofit, and the fact that you have all these tax advantages, you put those two pieces together, some incredibly good things can happen. Let's think about, we've been thinking about that, now let's look about what that actually looks like in practice. And first of all, the most important thing is focus on success, not just survival. And you measure your own growth and the good you're doing compared to the size of the entire problem you're in. Many nonprofits just think about the good they can do with the resources that they're able to get. That's absolutely backwards. You have to think about how much resource you need to solve the problem. You get ahead of the challenge. That is the path to growth, and we're going to look exactly at what that looks like. Again, think about success, not just survival. If you think about survival, you will be on a bread and water diet, and too many nonprofits are there. There's three major management tools that you need. Now we're getting into the nuts and bolts of this. There's three major management tools that you need to transition from a nonprofit that struggles into a social enterprise that scales and solves problems, not just nibbles around the edges. And there's three pieces. There's a business plan, there's a revenue pipeline, and then there's a dashboard. It's an entire management system. And we're going to show you what that looks like. And in this webinar and in future webinars, we want to share the stuff with you. It's not complicated. It's a very simple, proven process that every business that grows and performs well uses. But it's like going to the gym. It's easy to pick a weight off the ground, but doing it every day and getting your exercise, that requires discipline and focus. So what we say about this system is it says easy, but does hard. It requires really the type of grit that you already have for doing the work that you have. So we don't believe it's too heavy a lift. Let's look exactly into the specifics of these tools. But you have a business plan that really sets your 5-year goals. And you have a revenue pipeline that says how we're going to get the money to meet our business plan goals. And then we have a dashboard that says how well we're doing executing on everything. Plans, money, execution, and they all work together. It's a complete connect the dots system. And we're going to walk through the pieces of that right now. First of all, here is a business plan template. It's comprehensive, compelling, concrete, and concise. And I want everyone to note that we are not asking you what your mission is, what your vision is, or what your values are. That is not relevant. We are throwing out the tried and true nonprofit management framework, and we're replacing it with an enterprise framework, and we're asking different questions. Instead of your mission, think about what problem are you solving? Very different question than your mission. Then you have to answer another question, why you're the best organization to solve it. And then there's another very simple and very hard question, what exactly does success look like? And you have to have what Jim Collins, the author of Good to Great and Great by Choice, calls a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. Are you in your life to solve 100% of the problem or nibble around the edges? You decide. It takes a tremendous amount of courage and commitment to set a BHAG. And then you talk about how your program drives the success. We talk about key performance indicators, also known as a KPI. This is a standard business term. And you'll notice throughout this presentation that I use language that is not often used in the nonprofit sector. It's very commonly used in business, in finance, and you know what? Nonprofits need to use it too because they're businesses also. Now we talk about after you have key performance indicators, how we're going to pay for everything. And here's the special sauce. This is where it gets tricky, and this is where we're going to help. There's many ways, half a dozen different ways to earn or generate revenue for your nonprofit. Individuals, foundations, corporations, government agencies, and earned income. There's even impact capital, private debt and equity. Really going after that money and understanding how to access it does require a little specific expertise, but that's what we coach folks through. But the truth is, it's not that hard. It requires more grit and energy than some sort of complex intellectual formula. You just got to go out there and do it. And we'll show you on this call exactly how to get started. Finally, a little bit about marketing, and then you talk about you have a financial projection. Everyone on this call should be part of an organization with a detailed 5-year financial projection. And here's the trick. Look at all these 8 questions. Oops. There's 8 questions here. If you can answer them all concretely and concisely in under 10 pages, you have the start of a world-class business plan. And that completely sets you apart and puts you on a pathway to growth. Okay, there's your business plan. Now we're going to move forward. Now we're going to look at the second piece. There's 2 pieces to revenue. Your plan, your revenue plan with all your strategies, and then what we call a pipeline. And we're going to walk through that today. Here again are the major income domains. You can get gifts from individuals, which we prefer to call investments, by the way. Many of you already know about foundation grants. Ironically, foundation money is the hardest to get. It is the least amount of money, but it's where nonprofits go first. And it's a big reason why nonprofits stay small and struggle is they go after foundation money and they don't know how to access these other capital markets. Corporations, learning how to work with corporations with grants and sponsorships, very powerful. Accessing local, state, and federal government agencies. And then there's an enormous array of earned income opportunities. And then you can even go out and get loans from individuals and even banks and other institutions. And understanding your goal in these categories that meet your business objectives, figuring out how to find investment prospects, and how to specifically acquire them, get their attention, engage them. Over time, it's a relationship building process. Just as we don't walk up to someone and ask them to, we want to embrace them and ask them to get married on the first date, we don't go out to investors and give them a pitch the first time we meet them. So this engagement piece is very deliberate. And then when folks are ready, we solicit their investment and then we make sure we report back to them. This is another huge failure point for the nonprofit sector. We get people's money and then we just ask for more and we fail to say what good we've done. But with this whole strategic planning process, which we can go into detail in a future call, we also make sure we understand how to staff it, how to run it, and how much it's all going to cost. This right here is a 1-page spreadsheet. Every organization should really understand how to get into all of these capital markets, what the goal should be, and how to walk through the entire relationship building prospect with all the people in these domains. And I'll tell you this, the way that most nonprofits do it isn't right. They go after the hardest to get money, and they do it with really expensive strategies like auctions and mail campaigns and grant writing, and as a result, they're not growing. Once you have a plan, now you have to have a pipeline. This looks a little complicated. We're going to walk through it quickly, and again, we'll answer your questions. Again, we're going through in a half an hour a complete planning, financial, and execution system that's for every organization. So there's a lot of content here. So I apologize if we're moving through a lot of stuff too quickly, but there'll be lots of opportunity for you to unpack this. First of all, we want to organize everyone by relationship stage. 1 is a prospect that you've heard of, you haven't talked to the person. 2 is you're engaging them. 3, you're soliciting them. 4, they've said yes. 5, they say no. And 6, they've given you money and the money's in the door. And again, you see over here, here's your various revenue domains. So you simply set up a pipeline, which is a simple chart that you measure every 2 weeks, just like clockwork, and say, how are we doing? How many people, how many investment prospects do we have in each of these domains by stage? And are we talking to them, and are we moving them from stranger in stage 1 to supporter in stage 6? And we're very focused on not just the relationship movement, we're focused on how many dollars we have in each category. And this is the single most important thing I would like everyone on this call to take away. Forget everything that I tell you, but remember this. If you want to grow your organization, if you want to succeed, not survive, you need to start counting this one thing: the number of face-to-face conversations you have with current and prospective supporters, which we prefer to call investors. Count them religiously with discipline and focus every 2 weeks. If you get into the habit of just counting how many people you're talking to, and then over time increase that number, and then if you have a system like this, how well are we talking to people? That is what generating money is all about, measurement. Of course, you got to do it well with passion and integrity, but a lack of this disciplined measurement system is what keeps nonprofits small. And even a small nonprofit can do it. This is not that hard to do. It just requires, again, that discipline. Okay, finally, by the way, when you get really good, you can do advanced key performance indicators. You can talk about conversion rates and relationship development and pipeline and loyalty, but that's all the fancy stuff that the big hospitals and universities do. Just getting started for now, just want folks to be aware of this stuff. Okay, now we're into our third piece. We've talked about what a business plan is. It asks very simple, concrete questions. It puts you in an enterprise framework. We're going to solve this problem. This is why we're the best at solving it. Here's what success looks like. Here's our strategies. Here's what we're going to measure, right? Now you've got your funding strategies, and you know that you need to count and track conversations across every strategic domain every 2 weeks. That's a lot. And now we go to the third management domain, which is a dashboard. On the dashboard, this is where you say what you've done. Quantity is the first measurement. These are just sample graphics. This is where you say, okay, we say we're going to feed 500 homeless people this year and 1,000 people next year and 5,000 in 5 years. And this is just how many of them you feed. And again, I'm just picking a simple example. Quantity. Again, because you're operating within a context of how much problem you need to solve, this is that needle right here. And then you have the quality, your key performance indicators. How many people are you moving out of homelessness, for example, and into a sustainable livelihood? You're not just feeding them, you're moving them, and maybe we have a housing indicator here and an employment indicator here. Again, all of these things come right from your business plan, and all you're doing is tracking the execution of your goals with little dashboard indicators. So after quantity and quality, then you put your finance, you just put your budget versus actual here, your month of cash reserves right here. You want to be between 4 and 6 for most organizations. And then you put your revenue stream over here. Right from that pipeline, you can see where you get your cash flow, and you can get your face-to-face contacts right here. Here's the thing. This is called an executive dashboard. You could give, if you build something like this for your nonprofit, and you can show someone that, yep, we've got our business plan, here's our revenue strategy, here's our pipeline, and here's how we're tracking our results. People are going to be blown away by how well run you are. And you know what happens when people are blown away by how well run you are? They trust you, and they will invest in you. People who are very successful and make a lot of money, this is how they've done it. And you show them that you understand and can run the same tools, you're completely focused and disciplined, you're transparent and accountable, and you're trying to get to scale, you're talking their language. This doesn't have to be perfect, but if you start down this path and ask people for help and engagement, you will really get people interested. And it's a completely different way of thinking than just coming with your hand out saying, give us money. Okay, we've done this a bunch. We've done this with nonprofits around the world. We know it works. The nonprofits that we've done it with grow 25% a year on average. Let that sink in for a minute. How many nonprofits that you know of income grows 25% a year? I don't see a lot of hands. If I could see everyone's hands, I wouldn't see a lot of people jumping up and say, oh yeah, it happens, but it's very rare. We have a firm and we do all this stuff, and here are all my partners. I'm not here to give you guys a sales pitch. I'm just letting you know that this is real. We've battle tested this. We have folks in our firm from all backgrounds and expertise, business, government, as well as nonprofits. And here's a typical client result. This is no joke. We've had clients that have been struggling. They've stayed small. We put in place a business plan. We launched the revenue pipeline, and what you see here is a classic. It's called a revenue hockey stick. It's not about survival. It's about success and scale. Here's the criteria for success, and there's some readings. There's 6 books. Everybody who works in the nonprofit sector, these aren't nice to reads, they're gotta reads. Good to Great and Great by Choice, Jim Collins, Ken Stern, he's the former CEO of NPR Radio. He wrote an incredibly powerful book called With Charity for All. I've already mentioned Dan Pallotta's book on Charitable. And there's 2 basic business books. Very few nonprofits read them, and that's much to their dismay. But if you read Sean Covey's book, he's the son of Stephen Covey, who wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. Sean, with his colleague McChesney, wrote 4 Disciplines of Execution. This is a book on how to run anything, and it's fantastically powerful and short. Also, a book by Yitzhak Adizes. He's a Turkish management expert. He wrote a book on management, which is extremely powerful and should be read by every board of directors. Okay, we've gone through the reading, and here are the qualities that are also required. This is not a complicated system. You've already seen it all. We can explain it in half an hour, but it requires 6 pieces. No one ever said that running or growing anything, any organization is easy. And we talk about up front with all the people we work with. Make sure you're coming into this with these things in mind. Be optimistic that we can solve the problem. Because if you're not optimistic that you can get big and solve the problem, why bother? Courage. We have to have the courage to set that big, hairy, audacious goal. Again, if you don't believe you can solve the problem and you don't want to try, why? Have the grit to fail. Confront failure and risk. Very normal. And have the focus and the discipline to apply these types of systems, and again, the urgency to move quickly. We found that after working with hundreds of nonprofits around the world, these 6 qualities are the ones that really describe the winners, the ones who experience breakout success. But it's not easy, and we don't apologize for that. Okay, now we're going to look at some specific examples. That's the theory. You've seen the management frameworks. You've seen the books to read, the qualities to adopt, all that good stuff. Now we're going to get into specific examples. And I ask each of you to think about what the answers to these three questions are for your own organization. What problem are you solving? What does success look like when you've won everything? If you have unlimited amounts of money and you've spent it all and you've hired 1 million people, how does the world look different? What does that look like? And then exactly how much money do you need to raise to get there? Be specific about that. Okay, let's go into the first stage. Now we're going to go back in, going to go back to the business plan and say, okay, what problem are you solving? And we're going to contrast a typical nonprofit statement with a social enterprise statement. Let's look at the Yummy Food Project. And like every nonprofit, they talk about their mission. And as we can see here, this is long and it's kind of abstract. The Yummy Food Project's mission is to create a thoughtful and productive community of youth and adults from diverse backgrounds and work. It all sounds nice, right? You've seen these things 100 times before, okay? But they're so common. They put people to sleep and it doesn't give you any specific information. Let's look at how an enterprise would approach this. The Yummy Food Project will transform Kentucky. In 10 years, every Kentuckian will live within 10 miles of an affordable, local, delicious, sustainably grown farmers market. Healthier, happier people and a booming economy with opportunity for all will result. Very courageous, very specific. Completely different mindset. That really gets people's attention. Let's look at a vision of success. We envision a world where youth are active leaders, diverse communities feel connected to the land and each other, and everyone has access to fresh, local, healthy, and affordable food. But again, it's not really, it sounds nice, but there's 100 ways that this organization could do its work and sort of fit into this. It's very vague and very abstract. There's very little, you see an absence of numbers. Enterprise. We'll put an end to food deserts. In 10 years, there will be great farmers markets within 10 miles of everyone in our state. Specific, actionable goal. That gets people's attention. Okay, now we've taken a look at some sample business value statements from a business plan. Now let's take a look at how we're going to pay for everything. Most nonprofits, you've seen this before. Let's write people letters. Let's appeal for grants. Let's do fundraising events, capital campaigns, car washes, bake sales, galas. There's all that, candy bar sales. All of that stuff, everyone knows where that leads. The typical tenure of a nonprofit development director around the United States is 18 months. They're burnout tracks. Nonprofits aren't growing. The standard conventions around how nonprofits raise money are ineffective. Enterprise uses effective strategy, disciplined execution in all 6 funding domains. There's very discrete, very specific, very separate strategies that are different for every organization, and capturing that expertise and applying it and creating a learning process where, again, you're focusing on how many people you're talking to. That is the difference between an enterprise revenue strategy that delivers results and a very frustrating, very low effort, very low results process. And again, let's talk about what problem are you solving. Can you frame your work go through the next one. Can you frame your work in terms of a solution to a specific problem with progress that is focused and clearly measured? And this is where we want to start with our Q&A. We've spent about a half an hour on this talk. We're right on time here. I would like everyone at this point, as I promised in the beginning of this, I promised that this would be challenging. We want to try and upend some of the conventional thinking. We want to put out some big, potentially very scary ideas. We want to introduce some new concepts for folks. So I'm going to go ahead and wait for Hannah, the moderator, to field some questions, and Chris and I will answer them the best we can.
Hi everyone, this is Hannah from Chesapeake Foodshed Network. Thank you gentlemen for an amazing presentation. I certainly learned a bunch. I'm sure everyone else did as well. If anyone has any questions, please take a moment to type them into the question box. We do have one two-part question to get you guys started. Could you talk a little bit more about how to engage investors and how to build that relationship? Particularly, how do you know when it's the right time to make the ask?
What a great question. First of all, how do you engage investors? hold events where you showcase. It can be a little event. You could have be at a farmer's market, but you want to find people with two qualities. They care about what you do, and they have the capacity to invest in you. And you want to nurture that relationship over time. And the best way to nurture that relationship is show them your business plan. And you say, gosh, Sue, you're a successful businesswoman. You run a company. We're trying to do this food startup here. We're learning that we have to run like a business too. You have expertise. You can help us. I don't need a ton of your time. Take a look at this business plan and give me your thoughts. Use the business plan as a vehicle for engaging people. Keep it as a draft. Keep it fluid. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Have very focused conversations on how you're performing and how you're going to measure your performance. And over time, you will get to know Sue. You're building a relationship with her. You're understanding in a typical investment relationship, it takes between 8 and 15 conversations before someone's going to be ready. It might be 3 conversations. They might never be ready. But you'll be asking very intentional questions. Sue, what do you think of this business plan? You've given us fantastic feedback and advice. You know we need investment. Are you ready to consider joining us as an investor? We don't want to ask you too early, but we're certainly aggressive in our pursuit of investment. What do you think? So you know what? It's not magic. You ask them. You find out. Chris, would you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, it's important to get as many people in your organization engaged in that activity as possible. So equip all of your board members with a business plan and get them out there talking to their networks. Include your staff, include your volunteers, include everybody who's willing. Ask them to go out to their networks and identify people who might be interested in this work. And just ask them to share that business plan. You're not asking them to raise money. You're just asking them to introduce the organization to them and begin to develop that relationship. People on staff in those development roles can take over that relationship and continue to cultivate it and do the eventual ask later. But you want as many people as you can reaching into their networks and bringing folks into the organization.
And Hannah, what's the second part to that question? I hope we've done a good job answering the first part.
You actually did a great job of answering the first part. Thank you. The second part is how do you know when it's the right time to make the ask? So you actually answered that as well.
Yep. Ask them.
Yeah.
Radical candor, honesty, transparency, and you go to folks like, look, you know, don't hide the ball. Your business plan is going to say you need to raise millions of dollars. Hopefully you're that audacious. We're all going to die. Let's plan to do something amazing before we die. And there's going to be people that are going to be scared by that. And don't let them bring you down. You don't want to talk to Debbie Downer or Dougie Don't. You want to talk to the people that can make it happen, that dream big and that have done stuff like this before. Those are the people that are going to feed your soul and help you fill your investment account so you can generate the change that you need to see in the world.
Great. And another question that builds off of that one. How would you best engage a board in reorienting towards the SE model? Group reading from a reading list or other suggestions?
We have an ebook that we can share with folks that sort of gives some very pointy dialogue around this. But typically, reorienting a board in a social enterprise approach means giving them very, very simple things to do that are not threatening, and then measuring what they do and hold them accountable, and make it so easy and so unavoidable and so accountable that there's no ambiguity about what performance looks like. So that for our system, that means you first of all, you engage your board first of all in developing the business plan. And the rule is keep it shorter than 10 pages. The board members can change things, don't make it longer, and don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And as soon as you align your board around that business plan, following that template that we've just given you, then you say, okay, now that we've done this plan ourselves, I want everybody here to take it out into your own networks and test it, just as Chris said. And you're just going out and asking people, what do they think? There's no scripting, no coaching, no nothing. They got to do the work, and then they have to bring the feedback back to the organization. And if you can do something that simple, you've already started your board on the path to being enterprise and outward focused and revenue focused. Once you test the plan and you revise it and you get, hey, this thing is, it's going to change. We know that it's a living document. But then you say to your board members, look, go out and keep talking to people once per month, one a month. Do you believe in what we're doing? Share the business plan with somebody who you believe might care about our work, who might be well placed enough to find some investment for us, and just report that conversation back. And remember, you count those conversations. So every month you can go to your board, look, hey, the board had 6 conversations this month. Can we do 7 next month? Simple, powerful, transparent, and accountable.
So another question, how do nonprofits struggling to simply keep programs going gain the staff capacity and time to develop and begin implementing an overall fundraising plan of the type that you've laid out?
Most nonprofits are operating without adequate capital. All the money that they get, they spend it on programs, so they don't have the staff. They're in a bread and water diet. The way out of that bread and water diet is to write a business plan that shows what they would do with more money and shows that they would raise. First of all, you need to raise. We've had many clients with very small budgets that don't have any staff, no dedicated fundraising staff. And the first thing you do is we need to go out and raise $250,000 or $500,000. And some of that money we're going to spend on some development people. But you've got to write the business plan, and then you find those angel investors or those seed investors, people that are going to get behind you and invest in your growth. If you take all your money, if you fall prey to that vicious and inaccurate overhead myth, oh, we got to spend all our money on programs, you're dead. You're always going to be starving, and you're never going to have adequate staff to grow. But write the business plan, understand that you need capital to invest in your growth, make sure you get enough of it, and then you have to focus those conversations on finding those people in your networks. It's easily described, it's harder to do, but we've known and we've worked with nonprofits that have had they run only on grants or only on one type of income, and we know that this process helps them to diversify and expand their revenue. Chris, anything you'd add to that?
I think you've covered all the bases. I think the key is, as new investment comes in, make sure you invest in that growth engine. Make sure you're putting that money towards the capacity to continue generating additional revenue, rather than funneling it all into your programs, as most organizations do.
Great, thank you. Now, you mentioned grit. How do you recommend confronting failure and risk? And are there strategies to increase an organization's grit?
If anyone knows of any good strategies for increasing an organization's grit, let us know. It's just sort of this foundational thing that you have or you don't have. But by simply talking about it, first of all, and saying that we might fail and this is hard and we're going to show grit, people just have to kind of rally around that. And it requires really compassionate leadership and really powerful, charismatic leaders to say, hey, let's go do this thing. So many organizations operate in a belief system where they don't believe they can achieve something. And when something bad happens, everyone gets all upset. And if you adopt a different mindset saying we're going to try and grow, it's going to be difficult, we're going to have problems, and we're going to push through those problems. If you talk with each other about that and really have honest conversations with people about that and keep checking in with folks, that's basically the most that we do around that. There's all sorts of work in the organizational development domain around developing organizational resilience. And you know what? We prefer to just go try the stuff and develop the organizational resilience as a result of action. We don't spend a lot of time sitting around thinking about how we increase our resilience. We go out and do stuff and pick ourselves up when we fall down and keep going. That's our very simple thought on that.
And make that an important criteria as you hire new people. As the organization grows, look for that kind of quality, grit, optimism.
Great, thank you. So what do you think are the major barriers in nonprofits to doing any of the larger 3 things you mentioned in your presentation?
What are the barriers? Barriers are nonprofits don't know about stuff. They operate in a world that doesn't have effective business management principles. Because they conceive of themselves as nonprofits, not businesses. They don't use business methodologies, so they're not growing or running well. And it's a self-defeating mindset perpetuated by many people in the field. We're pretty upset about it, and we're doing something about it by saying, look, Elon Musk. We ask it a great. This is how we frame it. The most effective nonprofit in the world right now around alternative energy is probably Tesla. They are trying to transform our transportation and energy management system. They gave away 250 patents. They're a for-profit, but they don't think of themselves that way. They're actually they're losing tons of money. They're just trying to solve a problem. So if you think of yourselves, get out of the nonprofit mindset, which is very destructive. The nonprofit culture is filled with things, again, go back to that first slide, that keeps you small. And if you look at not what are the most effective nonprofits doing, but you say, what are the most effective organizations doing? And how are they solving problems? You get into a space where you go, okay, I need to have a business plan and a revenue pipeline, and I need to have a dashboard. So it's really just around awareness. And we are very different. Altruist is a very unique voice in the sector, and we are deliberately trying to positively disrupt how the nonprofit sector thinks and acts. So it becomes more thinking like an enterprise. So nonprofits can do this stuff just by getting started, just by being aware that high performance and scale is possible and having access to the tools and the methodologies. And we've given you all everything you need right here. You can walk through the entire system in a half an hour. Organizations have been using these methodologies for decades. Indeed, if you read Good to Great and Great by Choice, you'll see that these methodologies are the same ones that drive the most effective organizations in the world. We didn't make this stuff up.
Awesome, thank you. So one more
Chris,
question.
Did you have anything to add to that? Chris comes from, Chris is the former global IT director for a Fortune 100 company. I'm a nonprofit guy. He has a different style and way of conceiving of this, but Chris, would you like to add some other flavor to that?
Well, most nonprofits do tend to shy away from the whole business idea because there's this view of businesses as being bad, and Donald touched on that early on in the screen, and there is certainly a lot of bad things going on with businesses, but I think we need to break down those walls and understand that there are good things about businesses, and nonprofits can and should embrace those things and use them to do good in the world. That's really what we're getting at.
And again, it's just use the things that are effective, the metrics, the plans, the management tools. Keep your values, keep your branding, keep your, the good work that you're trying to do. This isn't about selling your soul, it's just about making your soul much more effective, if that makes any sense. Other questions?
Great. We have time for one more question. Also, if anyone has more questions, please feel free to type them into the question box. Even after we close Q&A, we will continue to collect questions and answer them afterwards. But for now, one last question. Investors want to know when and how you're going to become sustainable. It's a difficult challenge for a nonprofit. Any thoughts on that?
Your 5-year financial projection should have exactly when that'll happen, right? You forecast that. It's a simple year by year. You forecast out 5 years, and the next 12 months, you hopefully have it forecast out month over month. And you say to your investors, how would you like to learn about our progress? This is a forecast. Like all forecasts, it might work, it might not. This is our best effort right now. We're going to continue to adjust this forecast as we get the data in. Would you like to see it every week, every month, every quarter? Typically, your investors are going to want quarterly updates. So you can show them your executive dashboard, and then you can show them, here's where we are in our financial projection. You've got it all sorted out, and then you just report back to them, and you know what? They're going to understand if things don't work out the way you forecasted them. But you tell them, wow, our earned income only developed at 15%, not 30%, and we didn't get that government grant, but wow, we got a smaller investment, so we're only at 75% of our growth this year. We're not quite sustainable yet. We're going to have to push that milestone out another 6 months, just giving you an early heads up. And hey, if you see anything that we're missing, come let us know. If you foster that type of dialogue with your investors, they will trust you and stay with you. But nonprofits rarely have that type of transparency and accountability with their investors, so they don't foster that trust. They go, oops, didn't work out, and they give them a report at the end of the year, and when the progress has slipped and not worked out, there's been no accountability and no relationship management, so people, they go away unhappy. So again, have a good reporting process, be transparent, be accountable, understand your financial forecast, and ask for advice, not just money. They should consider it a relationship. Those are the things that will drive success.
And don't be afraid to think, remember, this business plan is not a commitment, it's not a promise. It's really your intent to do something significant. And if you communicate along the way transparently and authentically, like Donald suggested, even when you don't hit those targets, you're going to bring those investors along with you, and they're going to understand. So don't be afraid to think big.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I believe I'll hand it back over to you.
So for future webinars, we can talk with, if folks have found this valuable, and we can go deeper on business plans. We can go into the specifics on pipelines. We can talk about actual acquisition, cultivation, engagement strategies. We can talk about what a major investment proposal looks like. We can talk about how to run a pipeline meeting. We've got all of this stuff figured out, and we've done it over and over again. We are altruists. We're not in this to keep this information to ourselves. We know that we can help make a better world with the more organizations that know this stuff, so we're eager to share it. And we'll also look at, we can also look at some sample dashboards. And again, if you want to drill down specifically with us, we're happy to spend an hour with you looking at the specifics of your organization and go over this in further detail.
Thank you so much, Donald and Chris. What an informative and engaging presentation with insights into how, as you called it, a bread and water organization can work toward this new model of social enterprise. We are so grateful that you shared this vision and this detail. And I know that some more questions were coming in as we were closing that section out. And we want to really encourage participants to follow up with Donald and Chris directly. And thank you also to all the participants for your interest and for joining us. This was a really helpful webinar, and we hope that some longer-term relationships may develop out of it. We'll follow up next week with the recording and a post-network learning webinar survey. I really want to encourage everybody to take a few moments to fill that out, because we'll be asking for your input and feedback both on this webinar and for the broader context of the Chesapeake Foodshed Network. If you are interested or have any ideas about serving as a resource expert for a network learning webinar or our more food systems focused coffee talks, please contact Christy Gabbard, whose information is up at the top of this slide. She is the owner of Local Concepts and the CFN Network Director. This last slide is just a list of our upcoming network learning opportunities, many of which are still just being confirmed for the end of summer and into fall, as well as some of our upcoming more food systems focused coffee talks next month and again into the fall. Please visit our website, chesapeakefoodshed.net, for more information and to register for upcoming events. We hope that you can join us, and we hope that everybody has a wonderful day. Thank you again to the presenters and to the participants.
Thank you, Yana.
Thank you.